Good afternoon, everybody. This is Brett Tracy with Merits. We're going to give everybody a few more minutes, and then we'll start at the top of the hour. Welcome, everybody. It's 2 o'clock, so we'll get started. Once again, this is Brett Tracy with Merits. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to join us today. Our webinar today is titled Seat Elevation Codes, Modifiers, Fee Schedule, and Now and Beyond. A lot of the previous webinars that I've attended since seat elevation has been covered has been geared towards the topic of who qualifies and getting the documentation from clinicians. We thought it was important between myself, InCart, AccuServe, and US Rehab to join that phase 2 of, okay, great, we now know who qualifies, but how do you build this? What are the modifiers that we need? What are the fee schedules we're working with now and going forward? Before we get started, I want to go over our ground rules. Everybody on this call, attendee-wise, has been muted. We will be using the features at the bottom for Q&A. There's also a chat feature, but we will be using the Q&A for written questions. We will hold all written questions until the end, and then we will go through those at the end of the presentation. And we just want to get started now. Myself, Brett Tracy with Merits and Avid Rehab, Vice President of Sales, and then I'll let the other panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining. My name is Noel Neal, the Vice President of Corporate Compliance and Auditing at AccuServe. I'm happy to be here today and kind of just breaking down all the change and the nuance here. And I'll turn it over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Noel. This is Dan Fedor, Director of Reimbursement for US Rehab. And again, as Brett and Noel mentioned, and Wayne will, we appreciate you joining us. We know your time's valuable, and I think we have some good information for you today. So thank you for joining us. On to you, Wayne.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Wayne Graham, the Executive Director of NCART. As the 3 previous people have stated, we really appreciate your time. This is a big opportunity. Not only is it a great opportunity for the suppliers and the manufacturers, but it's an incredible product for the consumers and that's really what we're focused on. But we appreciate you being here and learning about this. And we are always open to assisting everybody in the complex rehab industry. Brett?
All right. These are our learning objectives for today. We're going to be going over a lot of the coding and modifiers and the allowables that we currently have and what Medicare has proposed, and then kind of go over the changes. Medicare had a temporary a hearing recently, last week or 2, and we kind of have an idea of what they want, but we as an industry presented 4 speakers. We'll discuss what we proposed, and we'll also go through the proper base code selection and electronics. These 2 learning objectives is kind of the reason why we're even doing this webinar today. The picture on the homepage that we opened up to, that is a single power chair. It's a tilt only, but it has 3 actuators. And I know as I was teaching my internal team at Merits that you now can do 3 actuators and the base is still single power. There was a lot of confusion. And I figured if we had confusion internally, probably everybody else does too. So we've got the powers to be here today. And we'll also, as a learning objective, cover the internal processes to prepare for these changes. With this, I'll turn it over to Wayne to kind of go over the history of how we got here.
Sure. Thanks, Brett. I appreciate it. Folks, just to give you a little background, this started prior to me actually coming on board. with NCART. So, some of this we're going to share with you is more recent, but, this is something that the industry's been looking to do for many, many years. As I said before, this is an incredible product that provides so much freedom and so much independence to consumers that it's always wondered why this was never covered. And the reason why is because the language, as far as Medicare's policy, said it was not primarily medical, in nature. Okay, and that's why it was never covered under this policy. Now there were certain, other folks that may have covered it and so forth, but without Medicare covering it, as everybody knows, because pretty much everybody follows Medicare. This caused a real problem for access for individuals who needed this great product. So there was a lot of work done before September of 2020, just getting everything together. NCART, CTF, US Rehab and Arts, and a number of other people worked together to really submit that national coverage determination to CMS. And what we were looking for was a coverage policy for power seat elevation and power standing, by the way. And what we wanted to do, we felt like we had the data, we had the information, we had the support of the whole entire CRT industry, not just suppliers and manufacturers, but consumers, clinicians, academics, and so forth, so that we could prove this to them. The one who submitted the application for us, so the determination request, was the ATOM Coalition, which is an incredible group of, it's called the Independence Through Enhancement of Medicare and Medicaid. It's led by a gentleman by the name of Peter Thomas, based in Washington, D.C. And Peter is exceptional at what he does. So it was great that we partnered with them to do this. Now, we did find out in mid-August 2022 that CMS opened up the comment period, the public comment for the seat elevation. And that's a big part of how they make these decisions, because they want to hear from the public on what, how valuable this is. And I will tell you, you guys delivered. We had over 3,000 comments in August of 22. I think it was close to like 3,500 for coverage from seat elevation, and across a broad spectrum of people. Like I said, suppliers, manufacturers, consumers were incredible. Clinician task force was incredible. A number, NARTS submitted a lot of information and so forth. It's the first time in my history of my career in this industry that I've seen everybody come together, and that's one of the reasons I think that we actually got a win out of this. So next. So on May 16th, 2023, it's ingrained in my brain. I should tell you something right there, that seat elevation systems were covered as an accessory to power wheelchairs. Okay, CMS found out that, and they agreed that they find that power seat elevation equipment on Medicare covered power wheelchairs falls within the benefit category for durable medical equipment. The one thing we've been seeking for many, many years, and they recognized it. And it was all due to the work that all of you folks did. And they actually went a little bit beyond the pros decision, because they added it in group 2 and they added in transfers and so forth. We're going to go over that in a little bit, but they felt like it's reasonable and necessary for individuals using complex rehab power-driven wheelchairs to have access to seat elevation for those that qualify. So next. Noel, I'm going to turn this over to you as far as the current seat elevation coverage criteria.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you, Brett. And Brett mentioned this at the onset, that the coverage criteria that are now published in the NCD are criteria that probably everybody on this call is very familiar with. So I'll talk about them in summary, and you will have a copy of the slide, and you all probably are all experts that are here today on this call, so you're familiar with the coverage criteria. But in reference, we all know that the patient have to qualify for a complex rehab base to get the seat elevator as a separately payable benefit. We'll talk a little bit about the group 2, that where the seat elevation system is inclusive and that being considered as an individual consideration. But for the policy that is published, clear guidelines that we know for coverage, it's specifically for the complex rehab base. So the patient has to meet all those requirements for the complex rehab base in order to meet the requirements for the seat elevation system. So there's really 2 specific coverage criteria 1 and 2. And one is really that the patient had a specialty evaluation. I think we move on a little bit quickly there, but that's fine. We had a specialty evaluation done with the beneficiary, and that can be done by the LCMP or a practitioner with specialized training and experience with rehabilitative treatment and therapy. So your physiatrist, if they're properly trained, would be one of those clinicians would be able to evaluate to meet that requirement. Similar to the requirement now under the CRT power wheelchair base, where the LCMP evaluation is needed. But if you have the physiatrist, then they can meet the requirement for both, as long as they have the requirements. And the second requirement is one of these options that are listed here in the NCD. You can move on to the next slide. Thank you. The patient, in addition to having the specialty evaluation performed, that they have one of these requirements. And I think it's important because I've seen some misunderstanding in the industry thinking that you actually have to have all three. But it's important to know that it's any one of the following scenarios would apply. So if the individual perform weight-bearing transfer to and from the power wheelchair while in the home, using either their upper extremity during non-level, which are uneven, sitting transfer, and or their lower extremity doing sit-in transfer. The transfer may be accomplished with or without a caregiver. And I think that's an important distinction as well. It doesn't necessarily mean that the patient has to be able to do this transfer on their own, but with the assistance of a caregiver, coverage consideration will be given. The second one is criteria B. The individual requires a non-weight bearing transfer, for example, dependent transfer to and from the power wheelchair while they're in the home. And the last one is individual perform reaching from the power wheelchair to complete one or more of their MRDLs. And we all know those to be like toileting, feeding, dressing, etc., in the customary area of the room. So just again, this is nothing new. This is information that has already been reviewed on previous webinars that we've been on ourselves and we've participated on. But just because we're talking about CRT, seat elevation system, we kind of wanted to go over that. Next slide, please. Great. So, and I mentioned this from the onset as it relates to the base and the individual consideration. So we all know that Medicare actually, CMS has two designation for seat elevation system. There are the complex bases and the non-complex bases. The requirements that we just went over kind of covers in detail the requirements when a patient qualifies for complex base and when they qualify for a non-complex base, which are the group 2 no par options. Those are currently being reviewed by the DME Max under individual consideration. I will tell you what I see a lot of providers are doing there, just making sure that the patient actually meet the requirements for the standard mobility, PMD, and then using somewhat similar coverage criteria where possible as what's published for the complex seat elevation system to be able to qualify those patients. And again, those are individually considered. Those items currently, the KOA 3.0 and 3.1 are not under the PA. So providers just have to make sure that the documentation is well documented in the event of an audit or an appeal. Next slide, please. And I'll turn over back to you, Wayne, I believe. Sorry, Brett for coding.
Okay.
I think you're on mute.
Okay. The submitted claims there for the DMAX started on May 16th, as Wayne was saying. And, you know, right now we're operating under one code that encompasses everything. So the E2300 will be on anything coded higher than K0835. Anything lower than that, so a basic group 2 chair, there are two codes, K0830 and 831. These are the two codes that Medicare and Medicare Advantage plans are directing us to use. If you use an E2300 on anything lower than K0835, it will be denied by Medicare and Medicare Advantage plans. So if you normally bill out K0823 and you put the K0823 with the E2300, you will get kicked back. This does create a little bit of a gap. The K0830 and 31 code have a weight capacity of 300 pounds. So we get the question all the time, hey, we've got a Vision Super that goes to 400 with a seat elevator. It is coded as a 3031. How do you bill it? And the answer is if the patient is over 301, there's not a code at this time. It is a gap that we have. It's a question that we're going to have to address with CMS. But for right now, these are the codes that we're working with. I did hear about one provider working with a Blue Cross plan, and where they were able to do a patient that was over 300 pounds. But that was, once again, not a Medicare or Medicare Advantage customer. But we do recognize that we have a gap right there. Next slide. Right now, we're operating in a temporary allowable situation. One of the things to note is for these interim local fee schedules, and Noel, I'll have you come off mute here in a second, kind of talk about what trends you've seen for the temporary allowables. CMS has put out a proposed allowable. We'll discuss that here shortly. That's the future and where we're going. But right now we're operating in this interim allowable. And Noel, what if you want to come off mute, what trends are you seeing right now?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I mean, you're probably going to cover this later on, what the proposed allowable is, but what we're seeing currently being paid by Medicare across various states are way higher. We're seeing some allowables between 2,900 all the way up to about 3,200 for the seat elevation system across various state lines. Probably the lowest I've seen might have been like 2,700 or something like that. But the allowables are way higher than what was proposed. And these obviously vary from state to state. But we've probably seen claims process at this point across all our client base, pretty much for almost all the states. And they're consistently between that 2,900 to 3,100, 3,200 range.
Medicare did have a hearing recently, and during the hearing, they kind of gave us an idea that we're going to be operating in this temporary zone until February, when they will announce the new codes and fee schedules. The release date and expected release will be April. That's what they've put forth. So we will be operating in these temporary allowables until then. It is worth noting that if your submitted charge is less than what they're paying, then they will pay you at your submitted charge. So always make sure that you have a good idea of what the temporary allowables are, so that you can be capturing all of that. Next slide.
Right. Can I just add something else to that? Just
Please.
to mention, I think it's a very good point with the build amount. The amounts that you see and you get compensated should be consistent within your state. So if you do see that on one particular claim, you got a specific allowed amount, and on another claim, regardless of the base, the E2300 is reimbursed slightly different. Just, you probably want to query the MAC specifically, because within a state, the fee schedule, what we've seen have been consistent. We have heard initially of some scenarios where the allowed amounts were different, and it's because suppliers included in the narrative of the claim their suggested price, and those claims appear to have been processed in accordance to that amount, as opposed to the set fee schedule that were established for each state. So just be mindful of that. Regardless of what you bill, the DME MACs have established a fee schedule for that state, and that should be the prevailing rate that those are paid upon. And so there's not necessarily a need for you to include in the narrative your suggested price. Back over to you, Brent.
Prior to the May 26th date, if you tried to submit a claim for E2300, the K0830 and the K0831, they were auto-denied as non-covered. It took Medicare 10 days to get the logic to accept these codes that happened on May 26th. But that still does not apply to the prior auth list. So if you try to prior auth any one of these three codes, it will be deemed as non-eligible codes, and you'll get the letter stating so. So just make sure that you are not putting these through the prior auth system. And E2300 is like every other accessories. They do not have to officially be PDAC coded on the product list, but your K0830 and 8K0831, they must be officially on the list. Make sure that you are checking the PDAC list to make sure that the chairs that you're providing as K0830 and K0831 are listed under the PDAC as officially having that code. And then the modifiers for the E2300 would be the NU-BP-KX, that's considered a new product. The K0830 and 31, those are rental items, so you'll build them with your normal modifiers that you normally do for your rentals, which are RR, KH, KX, or the KI for the KH in months 2 through 3, and then months 4 through 13, you'll use the KJ and KI for those months. As I was mentioned before, the K083031, that code's been around since 2005, did not become active until May 16th in the system. It has a weight limit of 300 pounds. I know as a manufacturer, we've got group 2 chairs that go to 400. The code goes to 450. So we get asked all the time, what do we do? Right now, we have a question mark. This is a gap that Medicare will need to address. Their proposed solution should solve that. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But one of the, as I was mentioning during the learning objectives, one of the main reasons why we decided to host a webinar and discuss this is it became clear that seat elevation does not change the base code. When I do new hire training for our team, it's always very confusing to people when I tell them that, this is a single power base. It's tilt only, but tilt only can be 1 or 2 for your base because the seat or the legs do not count towards the base configuration. It is now been stated by Medicare that seat elevation is the same as articulating foot platforms. It does not count towards the base, and it will still be a no power option, which is incapable of accommodating a power tilt, recline, seat elevation, or standing system. If a power chair can only accept power elevating legs, it is considered to be no power option. It will count towards the electronics upgrades when it's medically necessary. Make sure that you are getting your medical necessity to go through the joystick to operate the power functions through the drive control, which means that you'll have a scenario where you will have a patient qualify for tilt, power legs, and power seat elevation, and you will need multiple power electronics because the electronics go by the number of actuators. So by putting 3 actuators on a unit, you can still bill out the E2311, E2377, E2313, but it will still be a single power base. For group 2s, that's K0835. For group 3, it'd be a K0856. We are looking to put out a little cheat sheet for your staff. When we send out the recording and a copy of the PowerPoint, we'll also try to include an attachment, which will have kind of a little cheat sheet that you guys can print off as well.
Brett, just before you move on from this slide, I just wanted to offer some ounce of clarification here. With regards to what the current policy article says, there's an inherent conflict between it and the National Coverage Analysis and the NCD. So, and I think you touched on this, Brett, and just wanted to kind of clarify that so folks understand. Currently, the verbiage in the policy article for no power option basically says that it's incapable of accommodating power tilt, power recline, power seat elevator. We're expecting that the policy article will be updated timely to remove seat elevation from that statement, because the way how the NCA is interpreted, by the DME Max is that a no par option should be able to accommodate a seat elevation system. So the way how it is written in the policy article as of now is not congruent with that statement. But we've reached out to the medical director, and we're expecting to see a policy article update momentarily. If I were to guess, I'm going to guess that it would be updated to reflect that the no par option base can accommodate a seat elevation system. But I just wanted to clarify that just in case you don't go back to the policy and say, well, it says that you cannot accommodate a seat elevation system. Well, it says that now, but we're expecting to see that updated within the next couple of weeks. Back over to you, Brent.
Actually, that's mine. So,
Wayne.
yeah, thanks, Brett. Folks, needless to say, NCART and all the people that participated in all the work that was done here were not satisfied with the preliminary hearing. We worked with all the manufacturers in the 3-year process to collect information to make sure that we have a response ready once the coverage determination was announced. What we didn't want to do was to wait and hope that they come up with it. We really felt like we had a great argument as far as the coverage was concerned, so we started doing the work. Now, please remember, there's 3 parts to this decision. It's what we call the CCA. It's the coverage, which we got a positive outcome. Then there's a coding decision, and then there's the payment or allowables or fee schedule that is decided. Okay. Now, coverage comes first. Without coverage, the other 2 don't matter because you're not going to do anything. So after we got the coverage determination, we got back on the phone with all the manufacturers, and we went ahead and we submitted a coding request. And there was a lot of debate on which one to do. Should we submit 2? Should we submit 15? And so forth. We decided on 2, one for complex rehab standard weight, another one for complex rehab heavy duty. We felt like both of those were justified. We also recommended keeping K0830 and 831 as is for now and gathering more data, okay? Because it's just not been around enough. We needed more data. We don't want any unintended consequences, okay? And that's sometimes because I think we all know once something gets put into place, it's incredibly hard to get it reversed if it's doing potential damage or limits the ability of people to access this product. Next, please. So again, we were asked to gather data about pricing and the methodology that should be used to set the code and the price. Now, please understand something. The pricing here, I can't ever say this word. The hierarchy from CMS initially starts with what's called a comparison crosswalk, okay? And what that basically means is they're going to look at this product and they're going to compare it to comparable products that are out there. Okay, I felt like we made an incredibly strong argument that seat elevation is a standalone system. It's not an accessory. It's not like putting a cup holder on there or something else. This is a system, a seating system similar to tilt, and it should be priced accordingly. Okay, our manufacturing partners submitted detailed schematics and parts descriptions to show the comparability of the products. It was put together and it was all brought together because there's a tremendous amount of work by Rita Stanley, okay, who did a great job in getting all of this and deciphering it down to a very, very strong argument. The second method to price new products is the gap filling method, okay? Now, just to give you an overview of the gap filling method, number one, it's never really worked very well for us as an industry, okay? And I've been around over 30 years. But essentially what it does is it takes retail prices and it deflates it back to 1986 and then reinflates it to develop that fee schedule or allowable. Now, the question is, where did they get the retail pricing? Because I'm going to show you something. We have evidence that they didn't really get that right, okay? But essentially what happens is the problem is you got a situation where we didn't get CPI adjustments or inflation adjustments for several years. So the final number would not actually reflect the true number. And that's the problem with gap filling. Now, to CMS's defense, I just want to be upfront with you, that is written into the law. They have to use that. But again, it's not the number one way to do it. They do encourage, based on the hierarchy, that, again, they go with the comparable product. Now, CMS ended up choosing the gap filling method, and that resulted in a 2,261 proposed allowable, which we feel is not reflective of an allowable that's going to allow true access to all the consumers that qualify for this product. Next.
So after gathering all of that data that us manufacturers submitted, this is what Medicare CMS has proposed. So they proposed that we discontinue the E2300, which is a catch-all code. It's for all seat elevation. So they want to discontinue that code. They want to create a code specifically for the complex rehab technology industry. That'd be for codes K0835 and higher. They did not want to create a separate rehab code for heavy duty. As Wayne mentioned, the preliminary fee schedule that they're looking to move towards is $21.61 and 89 cents. For the group twos, they would like to discontinue the K0830 and 31 codes, and then create a code for a standard seat elevator. So essentially, they are looking to do 2 seat elevators like we recommended, but instead of a CRT and then a heavy duty CRT, they're looking to do 1 CRT for all weight classes and a seat elevator for standard power chairs. This would resolve the gap that we have with heavy duty, because in this case, you would take a heavy duty base like a K0825, and then you could bill out the standard seat elevator. But as we mentioned prior to this, there is no history of this. So we've recommended that we keep the 3031 code for now until more of a baseline is established. This would also allow for us to go back and prior auth the bases, because all of the traditional bases are in the prior auth system. So as of right now, we're looking at a date for a final ruling in February with an effective date April 1st. After they published this, there was a public hearing. Wayne's group put together 4 speakers. I'll let Wayne talk about what was discussed during the public hearing.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. So look, CMS has a very detailed process on how they come up with these codes. They're just not codes and fee schedules and everything. It's not thought of nilly-willy and they sit around in a room and go, okay, let's just go with this. There's a process, and part of that process is a hearing process. Okay. And I give them credit for that. They want to really hear, they present us with their findings, and this is what we believe, and this is what the pricing is going to be, and this is what we base it on. Okay. So come back at us and tell us that you either agree or you don't agree. Okay. So NCART decided to testify to provide information necessary to, once again, prove our initial coding and pricing recommendations are the best option when trying to assign codes and also to assign a fee schedule. We had 30 minutes to present. There were 4 presenters that spoke about different aspects of the preliminary decision, and Q&A followed. And we had, I think, a really strong group. We had Julie Periano, we had Brad Peterson, we had Peter Thomas, and we also have Bill Amer. Okay. Our focus was really on the following: that number one, CMS should treat seat elevation as a standalone system, similar to the tilt systems, and not as an accessory. Okay. We had the data, we had the engineering data, we had the clinical data to prove this to them. Okay. We believe that CMS should have used the comparable product approach, again, comparing it to the tilt. Okay. The tilt rather than using gap filling. Okay. I mean, we also identified here that, the retail price they said they used for gap filling was $299 below what we provide, what we found. Okay. Now, how did they do that? I mean, we all know how people search for price nowadays, right? They go to the internet. All right. And, people don't buy from internet people because they're more expensive. They offer the services and the clinical aspect and all the services that you guys bring. So we felt like that was a flawed assumption. Okay. We suggested again that CMS should have created 2 codes, one for standard and one for heavy duty, and priced them properly. Based on what we're seeing now, we believe that individuals in the heavy duty option are going to be denied access in an inequitable system because the cost to manufacture the heavy duty is much higher, and it should be treated accordingly. We also, once again, said, look, don't get rid of the K830 and 831. We don't have enough data at this point. We don't want to do harm to anybody. Let's come back and revisit that at a different time. So next. And like I said, I think the industry, I was very proud of this group. They all came together, really approached this in a very systematic method. We gave very strong engineering and clinical based argument as to why the coding in allowable needs to be changed. I will tell you the consumers were very well represented by Peter Thomas from Item Coalition, who explained how this preliminary decision is going to adversely affect and create inequitable situation for consumers in need of seat elevation. A lot of it was focused on the heavy duty, but also by using the gap billing method, it wasn't pricing it accordingly. Now, I've been asked, Wayne, what's your prediction? I want you to be Jimmy the Greek, figure it out and tell me what you think it's going to happen. Folks, I would tell you, I have no idea. Okay, I don't. I feel like we made a really, really strong argument. Okay, I fully back up what we did and the way we approach this. Okay, I wish I can get in the minds of CMS. Trust me, if I could, I'd probably be a billionaire. Okay, if I could figure out everything what CMS is going to do it. But the simple fact of the matter is, I just don't know, and that's the best information I can give you. We will await the decision, and we're going to discuss options moving forward if the decision is not favorable for consumers and suppliers and manufacturers. We just feel that's the best method to go about this. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Brett. Brett, I mean, what are your thoughts? What are your predictions? You've been fully involved with this thing from day one.
I'm very happy that they included standard power for Group 2s in the decision. I just really hope that they look at heavy duty seating. As a manufacturer, we build chairs for all 4 weight classes. I've got chairs that go to 300, 450, 600. I've even got a 700-pound chair, and I get asked at least once a month, a couple times, can I put a tilt on that 600-pound chair? Can I put a tilt and recline on it? And I've looked at trying to build one, and unfortunately, with the current fee schedule, I can't build a chair and for that cost. Hopefully we presented our case that building a tilt and recline that goes to 600 pounds, seat elevation is the same way. To push somebody up in the air that's 450, 600, it's a different mechanism than 300. And a fee schedule needs to reflect that. So hopefully they listen to our questions and our concerns, and I wish for the best. I know that Dan Fedor is on the call. He is under the weather, so he was a game time decision, and he was not able to participate. He is in the chat room in the Q&A answering questions. So if you guys have any questions, we will do that. But for predictions, Noel, you want to answer and put your thoughts out of what you think the prediction will be?
Sure. I'm here just kind of rubbing my crystal ball, and I see that CMS is going to do this. Just kidding, guys. As the gentleman before said, I mean, we really truly cannot really tell. I stand by what Wayne and Brett said, really, that I think the arguments were persuasive. I think that they were backed with not just clinical, but logical explanation as to why CMS should move forward with the decision. The pricing as proposed is significantly lower than what's being provided right now doing the gap method. And one of the challenge of any access to new technology is if you provide coverage for it, but the reimbursement isn't adequate, then you're still going to have access to care issues, because providers are not going to be able to do it at a loss, no matter how kind-hearted they are. At some point in time, the dollars have to make sense. So obviously, I hope that was persuasive enough, the documentation that were provided following the call, showing the difference between the data CMS used versus the data that is readily available in the industry. Hopefully that logic will jive, and we'll see an increase in the proposed reimbursement. That would be one of my first guess prediction, is that we'll see some improvement over the originally proposed fee schedule. As it relates to the elimination of the code, I would definitely say that would probably be something for them to do from a WISE perspective, so we can analyze the KOA 23 and KOA 3, sorry, KOA 30 and KOA 31. But I would not be surprised if CMS decides to move ahead with that proposal to eliminate that code prediction. Otherwise, the heavy duty, I think that the argument was overwhelmingly persuasive. And, you know, we're hoping that CMS is going to be logical here and create for us a new heavy duty seat elevation code, just because from the manufacturer's perspective, it's costing them more to create. And from what we've heard is that that cost, as the max had proposed in that comment period, that the base itself will offset the costs. Well, from what the data that we've seen and from the comments from the manufacturer, that's not necessarily accurate. The extra cost of creating a sturdy base for overweight and heavy duty is absolved within that, and there's no extra there that would compensate for heavy duty accessories, because obviously you need stronger graded material. So I would hope that, and my prediction too, is that CMS will take those into consideration and would also consider creating a heavy duty code for the seat elevation system. So those are my predictions. Again, I think the disclaimer must be clear that none of us have insight as to what CMS will do. These are just kind of our prediction. Our best case scenario would be that all of what we've asked and we've challenged, CMS will see the logic, which is not to eliminate the code, offer a high reimbursement, allow for a heavy duty code, and so on. That would be all of our hope, but just understanding some historical things that CMS has done, we are cautiously optimistic, is what I'd say.
Awesome. So that concludes our presentation. We are going to open up the Q&A at the bottom of your screens. You can type in any written questions, and we do have one in there. Tim asks, for group 2 elevation, that'd be the KZO 3031 code, does an evaluation for elevation need to be done by a PT and OT? Dan did reply back and say, yes, per policy, LMCP specializing in rehab does need to do the evaluation for power seat elevation. All right, let's see. There is a second question that came in. Has there been any news regarding the seat elevation as a modification for an existing chair?
Modification for an existing chair.
Yeah, so if they got a
perhaps you
chair
can give
last
some
year, can you retrofit a power seat elevation on there?
If we have, okay. So the chair was covered by Medicare, but at the time when it was covered by Medicare, seat elevation systems were not covered. And now that the coverage has been allowed, I guess I wanted to give a few scenarios, I suppose, in taking a crack at that question. If the chair is going to be then retrofitted to meet the retrofitted to add the seat elevation system and the patient qualifies for the seat elevation system based on Medicare guideline, it would be a covered benefit. So I wouldn't see any reason why it would not be covered by Medicare. But if that chair had a seat elevation system and it was paid for by some alternative source, probably would not be appropriate. Well, definitely would not be appropriate to seek reimbursement for that chair now, since coverage has been announced.
This is Dan. Yeah, Noel, I would agree with that. Trying to talk here, sorry, but the retrofitting, as long as the date of service is after May 16th, then it is a covered benefit, as long as they qualify for the chair. So I've been asked that several times about retrofitting an E2300 on a base that was provided prior to May 16th. And if they meet that coverage criteria, yes, that will be just submitted like any other change in condition or a new benefit, and the patient qualifies for that accessory.
Right. And this is also built upon the preface that Medicare actually paid for that base last year. So we know the base meets Medicare coverage guidelines. If the base was paid for by a different
Correct.
insurance company, then we kind of are in a different ballgame. But our answers are on the assumption that Medicare actually covered the power wheelchair last year.
Yep. Another question that came in was asking about the billing out the multiple power electronics on a single power base and and what the justification is for billing out the E2311, E2313, and E2377 for a single power base like the K0835. Is the justification the same as always?
Yes, the justification for the upgraded electronics is for that the beneficiary cannot operate the standard switch. So they need to operate whether it be the tilt, the power legs, the power seat elevation through the drive control as justified by a clinician. And as long as they do that, then that enables you to move to the upgraded electronics.
Right. Sorry for the awkward pause there, but Dan is absolutely correct. Nothing has changed. So whether it was a single power or multiple power option, the justification for that is sort of the same. But what I think the point here is it's not based on the power option, but it's based on the actuator. So as long as there's the actuators for the motors, that's what counts, not necessarily the power options. Great question.
And as I had previously mentioned, we're going to try to include a cheat sheet for you to print off when we send out a copy of this flyer. There'll also be a link for the recording if you want to have anybody else in your team record it. Do we have any other questions come in? I don't see any. Our information is on the thank you slide here. Please feel free to reach out to any one of us. We're here to help. We appreciate your time. And with that, I want to thank our speakers as well for their time today. And with that, we will conclude this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Everyone, have a good day.
A great day.